Well, thank you. It's a pretty cool job that I have. At least my parents are really proud of me. So I have a single-digit handicap, which in the world is pretty good. But at our company, I am like a beginner. I mean, it is. We field 4 industry cup teams a year. I don't even sniff it. I mean, we have a bunch of ex-tour players that still work at the ex-tour, ex-guys that tried to make it on tour, work at the company. So, I come in and I post a high 70s round, and they still beat me by 14 shots. So it's, it's all relative, I think, is, in all of this. So I work for TaylorMade Disc Golf. I've been there, thanks, Aaron, for quite some time. And I've seen this crazy growth and this crazy cliff that we fell off, and it's a pretty interesting story. And I'm really lucky that I kind of stumbled my way into the golf industry and the different people that I've been around. And so if there's 3 things like that have kind of molded my perspective on this gig and just the stuff that we do, one of them is that if you do the right things, and Aaron said, hey, can you give me a title for the talk for today? And I said, yeah, I want the title to be, if you do the right things, the money will follow. It always does. And she said, no, now you're venturing into a morality conversation, and everyone's going to read your headline. They're going to think you're talking about business morality, so can you change the title? And I said, fine, change the title, but that's what I'm going to talk about when I get here. And my point isn't that you're going to do the morality things right, though hopefully you are, but what my perspective on it is that when you do the right things as a company, that's when you make the money. And as soon as you lose sight of the thing you want to do better than anybody else in the world and chase the money, that's when things get really difficult. So that's one of them. The other one for me is this really simple quote by Margaret Mead. And I'm paraphrasing, it's not the exact quote, but the quote is, never doubt that a small group of committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. And I like that quote because it got jammed in my face by a gentleman years ago, and I've seen it happen now a handful of different times. And by world, it's whatever world you work in. And to really get a small group of people committed to things is really the most effective way. And ultimately, the question I would ask back to you is what is your definition of a brand, or what do you think defines brands most? And it's a fun conversation to engage in. It's also the stupidest thing you can do as a speaker is ask a room full of strangers to answer a question at the very beginning of a speech, because nobody wants to talk at that point. So I will jump off and say, hey, my perspective on what makes a brand, and I'll talk a little bit about this, is it's only made up of the people. And you would say that it's not true, because Apple is made up of all these cool technology pieces, and TaylorMade has all these great metal woods. But it is really, really the people that make the decisions. And what I mean by that is you change the people, you change the decisions that are made, and ultimately you change the trajectory of any of these companies, whether it be the most powerful one in Apple or even a little golf company up in Carlsbad. So I graduated here a long, long time ago. It's alarming to me how long it's been. It makes me sad to think I'm at this point already. And it angers me to be standing in this building only from the standpoint of when I was an undergrad here, I played on the lacrosse team, and at that time, this was the lacrosse field right here. And you guys decided to put a big building here, which upsets me on so many levels. But it's a very nice building. I was out at the reflection pond earlier thinking, yeah, maybe you do have it right. So anyway, so by a show of hands, how many people have ever played golf in this room? How many of you have kept score for 18 holes? How many of you have posted a score? How many of you have a handicap, a known handicap? Okay, so you're in the minority of these handicap ones, and it's good to find out. So what I wanted to do was just give a quick level perspective on this little industry that we work in for everybody, and I wanted to get a sense of kind of really what the room was like. But so our company, and I'm going to just kind of kick you through this part just so you have a bit of it, was started by a gentleman named Gary Adams a long time ago in 1979, and he created this product here. And I brought one with me, but what's interesting about it is this product was the first metal wood ever created, and this guy, Gary Adams, decided that he wanted to change the golf world forever by doing something that the industry had never seen, and his simple goal was to help golfers play better golf, and he believed that by making a metal wood, you could do that. And so the cc's, cubic centimeters, of this golf club is about 120 cubic centimeters, which I only give that to you for perspective, because in today's world, I'm going to take you from how we got from that one to this one, which has a bunch of moving parts. It's made of 11 different materials, and it is 460 cc's, so nearly 5 times the size of when we first started. And it's an interesting little journey of innovation and peaks and valleys. But the industry itself is not all that big. The industry, like the golf industry, says we are a $68 billion industry, but the equipment scope of that is really just about a $12 billion kind of zone that we play in. And if you look at kind of how it's broken out, the U.S. kind of, in any given year, makes up about half the industry. So it kind of toggles somewhere between 40 and 50%. So half that is done here. The second biggest market is Japan, followed by Korea, then UK and Canada. And for us, we prioritize our business in those markets. We focus on the U.S., and then we have our key markets are those next ones right on down the row. And we have business units in each of those that are standalone business units specific to the golf company, which is, I'll get into why that's unique here in just a second. And then just as far as like, okay, how do you break that up as far as categories? The biggest one is apparel, which everybody, if you've played golf and you bought a gift for somebody, there was a logo on it somewhere. There are more shirts and socks and shoes sold than anything, followed by the accessories category. And then these ones are really, from a TaylorMade perspective, this is kind of the side of the ledger that TaylorMade tends to really focus on and has really been the birthright part of it. It was a company that was founded on the metalwood side of things, and we ultimately started to diversify into other categories, and we'll talk about exactly how. But when we began, we were obviously a nothing, and we were trying to create a new world. On the left side here, I'm just for perspective, show you kind of how we sit from a metalwood perspective in the world here. And so these are our big competitors, Callaway, Ping, and Titleist. Today, as a metalwood market share, we're in the mid-30s, and followed, by this next group here. On the iron side here, we still sell more irons than our friends down the road, but kind of same competitors on and on and on. And I do appreciate that you took the Nike golf hat off earlier. So we're for reference, right? Try and hang with the fact that these are in the mid-30s, kind of mid-20s, because this is a blended number from 11 to 15. And 11 and 12 were our high points, and 15 was our low point. And when you blend it all together, this is the map that I show in front of people, but there's a dark period in there as well. So golfers, how many of us play this sport? The U.S. makes up about half the world as far as golf population goes, and so there's roughly around, we say, 24 million golfers in the U.S. And so that gets us up into kind of the 50 million around the world. There was this golf bubble that happened here kind of in the 2000s. Some folks think it was a Tiger Woods effect, and it potentially was. And then right around kind of the Great Recession is when that bubble kind of started to burst. And so what was interesting is, I think it was 2000, we got to our high point of 30 in the US, so we were scratching, and everybody thought, man, we are on a rocket ship. And interestingly enough, our growth curve kind of followed that. But what didn't change with the golf bubble was rounds played. So there were kind of some tire kickers that came in that window there, and there were more golfers, but they weren't playing a bunch more golf. And so kind of the rounds per player were down. But we really kind of averaged somewhere between 450 million and 500 million rounds of golf here in the US. So what's interesting about that is it's trending a little up for those that are playing golf. The struggles for our industry today is that cliche millennial group, youth, and women's market. And so if anything, there's tremendous opportunity, and I'll kind of kick back into that point a little bit later as to why I think there's optimism on the horizon for our little $12 billion industry. So this is kind of 1979. There's my man, Gary Adams, who decided he had a dream out of a little garage in McHenry, Illinois, and he wanted to make a metalwood, bringing us all the way to here. And all along this journey, what is interesting is between kind of 1979 and 2000, not really a lot happened. He made a metalwood. Got a lot of people to play metalwoods. We won our first major, and then we kind of just settled in, right? We were just a golf club company. And then in 1997, the Adidas group decided they wanted to buy Salomon, which owned TaylorMade at the time, so they did, and we became part of Salomon. Where I fall into this is right around 1993, I fumbled my way into the golf industry as a customer service rep for an apparel brand called Ashworth, and I was as proud as anything the day I got my headset because I felt like I had made it. And I had a cubicle and a business card that said my name on it, and I mean, what could be better? I had a degree and a headset. So I've kind of followed an interesting little path with Ashworth, which at the time was the #1 golf apparel brand. It was on a little kind of rocket ship climb. It was a Carlsbad-based, locally built company, and it was a blast. I left there in 1997 and joined TaylorMade in 98, and so I got my eyes open to what it was like to be a part of a $20 billion company from a $100 million company. And what was cool about it is, for the very first time ever, Adidas was going to try something new. And they owned, they had a category, Adidas Golf, shirts and shoes and socks and belts. And they had just bought a ski company that owned a golf company. And so rather than suck it all into the mothership, they decided they were going to create a standalone golf company business unit, which was different than any other sport they had. They didn't have a basketball business unit or a soccer business unit. They did within the confines of Adidas, but they were really categories. So what they did is they took Adidas Golf and they moved it to Carlsbad, and they created a golf company, which was different. And what the thinking behind that was that a company run by golfers, there would be a DNA effect that would happen, that by having a category run by non-golfers, potentially in a German-run organization, it wasn't going to have kind of the real core fibers of what makes golf golf. And so we created TaylorMade Adidas Golf Company in 1998, and I got to be a part of that. So that happened, and along the way, we signed some pretty cool tour players in the form of Sergio and Jason Day and Dustin Johnson and Justin Rose, and we've had a really cool run with all these guys. For those that follow the pro sport, Jason Day is the #1 ranked player in the world, which is just cool for us. We've never had that before, so that's a blast. We also bought 3 different golf companies along the way. One of them was the MaxFly Golf Company, and we bought that so we could get into the golf ball space. We subsequently sold that brand mark to Dick's Sporting Goods, but the reason we bought a golf ball company was because the patent minefield in being in golf balls is tremendous, and so we had to buy basically a patent portfolio. We bought Ashworth, the company I started with, in 2008, and in 2012 we bought another brand called Adams, and I would say that part of that led to where I'm going to talk about a little bit of the cliff part for us. And so we found this crazy growth, and then we fell off a little bit later on down the road there. And if I could just pull out a couple things, one of the things just for you to get a little bit of like the DNA of our company is that along the way, what's been killer about working at this place is that every time we open a door, it opens a bunch of other doors for us. And literally, we have done things in golf that have changed an industry, from creating a metalwood to creating a golf club that had screws in it, to making a golf ball that had 5 layers, not 2 or 3, and ultimately the best golf ball out there, to adding an adjustable hosel, putting a speed pocket in it, cutting holes in the front of the iron, and then ultimately creating a multi-material product. And why I say those are interesting, because everybody does that, is that along the way, TaylorMade was the first to do this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this one we just marketed better than everybody else. And so they're going to follow us down that path. But it's interesting to see an entire industry follow a brand that will kick a door in, and then when they kind of get close to us, we'll go find a new door and pave a different way. So I wouldn't be a marketing guy worth a shit if I didn't bring a video. So I brought one. It's a 3-minute video, and it's an interesting look. There's just a tonality that I thought it'd be kind of cool to share with the group today, just so you could get a little bit more of a feel for kind of how we do a little bit of the creation of the products. And then I'll talk really about the journey we've been on since then. So a couple. We've also always had a fascination with cars and in the golf space, and the way cars are designed, the materials car companies used. And so we started kind of kicking, let's stay with the cliche, kicking the tires with a company called Chip Ganassi Racing. And as we started doing a little bit of a technology share out with them, we found that there were so many similarities between the Ganassi Racing Group and TaylorMade. And so we just did an interview, we put this video together, and there's a little bit of the Ganassi in it, a little bit of TaylorMade in it, but I think it gives you a little bit of the vibe as to our obsession for making better products. So let me just show you that.
The Ganassi brand is the free interchange of information with each other. It's a culture of communication. It's not allowing ego to get in the way of the process. If anybody in the room has an idea, we do listen to it.
If not, you're never developing. If you're not ever striving to make things better or lighter or faster, then you kind of get left behind for sure in this industry.
The people at TaylorMade understood the product. It reminded me so much of what we do here. The process is actually very similar. I saw a group of people that were able to take a concept to an idea through an athlete, to a prototype stage, from a prototype stage to a development stage, from the development stage to a manufacturing phase, and then back into the athlete's hand when it was all done, and then for the masses.
Every golfer's swing is unique. It's different. You know, we've had a goal to create adjustability to fit these players and personalize it so that it can improve their game. If we win on Monday, we've got a good chance of winning on Sunday.
A big deal for us with the drivers, in order for them to be able to have a more effective race car on the racetrack, is weight distribution.
A few years ago, we couldn't get down to the minimum weight because so many things have been added safety-wise and aerodynamically. So literally we went through the whole car and we were able to find 5 pounds of weight reduction just looking at plumbing and taking washers off bolts that didn't need them. And there was probably 100 things we did, and those 100 things added up to 5 pounds. But then that 5 pounds let us change the weight distribution of the car, so we were literally about a 1/10 of a second faster. 1/10 of a second is the difference between first and 10th.
We're living in a world that is a fraction of millimeters. So the wall thickness of our castings in some areas is less than a millimeter.
Millimeters are gigantic. Those small incremental changes makes a huge difference when a ball comes off of a club face.
And I think that's what we do in our industry is we find a door. It might just have a little opening, but you know what? We ram through the door.
And then there's 2 or 3 doors of opportunity that open up. Some challenges, but some opportunities you never would have seen if you hadn't crashed through that first door. So we've led every year in performance. We push each year to cast the titanium thinner. This has been our mantra because we know each year a half a gram or a gram was going to get us that next level of performance.
You don't accept the fact that you can't find a way to do it. You search the globe, you find material, and that'll be the first phase of your product development.
The first CAD model that I did that showed where it was simulated was like, holy crap, that is way different than what we normally get.
If we could reduce that crown by 5% in weight, 10%, 30%, it's a game changer. And if we could provide a club that solves the issues of every golfer or improves what they didn't think was improvable before, that's huge. So personalizing that club, using the weight, using the systems that we've created, make it incredibly easy to make your game better.
So that video, we played that video when we launched this driver last year, and this is the M1 for those that aren't familiar with our product lineup. And when they talk about changing the millimeters and the grams that are saved, they literally, by creating this top part of the club is carbon composite. They reduced the top of the golf club by half its weight, and they would get excited if they could save a gram on an annual basis. And the fact that they were able to save nearly 12 at that point was an interesting thing. And so our company success has been really, really tied to having better products. And so our whole story, like if you think about it from this window here, kind of defies logic. I mean, there aren't a lot of golfers. The numbers were slipping a little bit. The industry is shrinking, and yet we were able to go from a company that at this point was like $300 million to our high point of almost $1.8 billion in a 10-year run. And then something really evil happened, and we fell off a cliff. But to have done that, there were some real core tenets that I think drove that success, of which I think we're getting back to those today, and I'll just share a little bit about it. But the story itself is interesting because it's full of kind of dynamic characters. We've had some crazy leaders at the company. There was crazy innovation. We became the largest, most profitable golf company in the world at one point. And then there was the human toxicity of some of the days where people just couldn't get along. And I grew up in Illinois, so I still kind of think of myself as like this, little dingling that came from a small town in Illinois. I got to move to San Diego, go to this school. I just kind of found my way into the golf industry, and I've gotten to go on this ride. And I'm just going to share kind of what that experience has been like and the things I've seen and learned, and see if that makes any sense or if you guys are inspired to ask questions. I also brought some goodies. If you guys ask cool questions, I'm going to give them away at the end. So this, I think, is, we talk about the company in these stages here. There was that 1979 stage that got us to 2000. Then really kind of from 2000 to 2011, we kind of were calling that TaylorMade 2.0, which today kind of seems so funny that we were one of the dorks that said, hey, 2.0 is cool, to here. But then there was this crazy growth period, and then there was this drift. And then today we're in this stabilization and really a literal turnaround of a company. But this one, if there's a moment in time, that's the one that's interesting to me, is in the year 2000. As much as Gary creating a metalwood in '79 was foundational for the company to even exist, there was a small meeting that happened in 1999. And at this time, when I got hired by the company, I got hired at the time specifically by Adidas to chase one of their tour players around the world, a tour player by the name of Ernie Els. And at the time, the way Adidas was structured, if they had like an icon, an athletic icon for any of these sport categories, they wanted one person to follow this person around. So there was a person who followed Beckham around. There was a person who followed, at that time, Anna Kournikova around. There was Zidane who had somebody, and Ernie Els, the golfer, had me. And so I got hired to kind of chase Ernie around for a year. That was my job. And really, my job at that point was to make sure he had the right shirt on, which is not a glamorous job, but it was a job nonetheless, and it came with another business card, so I felt like I was making it. But so unbeknownst to me, there was a little bit of a leadership change in the kind of the TaylorMade Adidas Golf business unit. And I didn't really get that at the time, what that meant. But we had a new CEO come in. The old president, the old CEO left. They brought back an original TaylorMade employee and a couple others. And there was this core executive group. And they went off site and they said, okay, now what are we going to do? We've kind of been assembled. We're this new leadership team. What's our task? And I guess for most of the meeting, I wasn't there, but for most of the meeting, the conversation was, you know what, if we can just get our operating expenses kind of in line, and I think if we, really kind of focus in on our products and maybe cut some margin dollars out of that, I think we can grow at a pretty nice, kind of high single-digit rate, and we'll be a lot more profitable than we've ever been. And I kid you not, for half the day, they tried to form a business plan around that. And as I'm told, then at one point, one of the execs in the group kind of raised his hand and said, well, what the fuck, man? Like, is that really what we want to be? I mean, do we want to be in the middle? And, it kind of rattled the room because in golf, we don't really talk like that and we're proper gentlemen. But so they paused for a second. He said, well, what if we wanted to be something else? Like, what if we just actually wanted to be the very best in the industry? And so as I'm told, and there's drama in all of the storytelling, that they paused for a while and kind of sat on it and decided, okay, let's do that. Let's not just be a little bit better, but let's be remarkable. And so they decided they were going to change the company, and this crazy rebranding of the organization happened. And we changed the logo, we changed the people, we changed our behaviors. We decided that the things that were going to matter most to us as a company were going to be innovation. We were going to make the best performing products in the market, better than everybody else. And we were going to do it through relentless innovation. And what I showed you from 2000 on is every one of those innovations has paid off in spades. And I could show you on the map where each of these blips has been because we brought something new to the market. On our heels always is somebody chasing us. But they decided innovation was going to be key. The other thing that they decided was we were going to become the #1 driver in golf. And that meant being #1 on tour. And in a passion sport like golf, whether you would admit it or not, the thing that matters most in this space is if you are #1 on tour, that is the ultimate power position. So they decided they were going to be #1 on tour. And they decided that we were going to reorganize an entire company. And for whatever reason, I got tapped on the shoulder as this silly little kid, and they said, all right, we want you to be this job they called Launch. At the time, they called it Launch Bob. And I didn't know what that meant, but they basically, it was, I got to be the cat herder. I was in charge of nothing, but I was responsible for making sure everybody lived up to their promises. So I got a cool new business card, and I took on this job. And why it was exciting for me was I was a 26-year-old kid at the time, and I got to sit in the room with all these executives, and I got to see how like this worked at that level. And it was alarming to see the amount of intensity that exists at that level in an organization. But anyway, I got to sit on the sidelines, I got to watch that, and I got to be this cat herder of this company that said we were going to go and be something remarkable. And so that, at the time, right, we were a $300 million golf company, and we said we wanted to be something great, and so we went on this journey. And so we went from that all the way through. And what's interesting about one of the other tentpoles was, and we call it tour domination, was we said we needed to become number one on tour. And when we said that, at the time, we had 6 guys in the world, 6, that played TaylorMade drivers on tour. We had a tour truck, but we had 6 guys that played it on tour. Today, we have over 550 of them. We're the number one driver on tour by a monumental gap compared to our competitors. But why it's the ultimate power position, and at the time, it took a crazy amount of effort to do, was if the number one metalwood, the number one fairway, the number one hybrid, the number one shoe, and the number one ball on tour are also the number one selling product at retail. And so what I find interesting about that stat is every time you do a consumer survey and you ask consumers what influences what you purchase, tour players is always one of the last things that they say, which just in the mindset of a golfer is interesting because there's this weird egotistical thing that happens of like, I don't care what those best players play, and yet they do. And so we decided that we were going to commit to this. And so to switch, and at the time, Callaway, when we were a $300 million company, Callaway was an $800 million company, and we basically flipped roles with them. They were number one on tour, and we took that from them. So we decided to venture down that path. And all along the way, we had to change the branding, the tonality, the product design language, the product performance, our messaging around innovation. And then in 2004, we did something that no one had ever seen before, is we decided to put screws into a metalwood. And it was one of those things where, oh my goodness, what just happened? And what it was in 2000, one of the other little tentpoles that was put in the ground at the time was they said that we wanted to get into the space of mass customization. And you've all heard that. You all know what I think mass customization means. But until that point, every time you bought a golf club, you basically were just buying one off the rack, right? It had a loft, it had a lie angle, it had a shaft flex, but you couldn't customize anything to yourself. You were going to buy a 9.5 stiff or a 10.5 regular flex shaft or a golf club, and that was it. And then we decided we were going to put screws in it. And what that allowed you to do was it allowed you to start to customize things to your swing. And so we got into that space, and it helped us grow. We also added the adjustable hosel a few years later, and same thing, right? An innovation comes to the market, and what's been fun to watch is that by and large, it is a slow to move market. But we bring that in, and most of the industry is like, who needs to move your hosel to have a better performing golf club? Every single golf club in the world today moves weights, has adjustable hosels, and mark my words, in a few years they will also have carbon composite crowns because of the ability to save weight on the top. So that happened. And then one of the personalities of the company was we were going to be a little bit of the hellions in the marketplace. We were going to be the risk takers. And we decided as a market share leader that we were going to do something that no one had ever seen. And at that time, 100% of all the golf clubs made in the world, every metalwood in the world, was black, or dark gray, or lighter dark gray, or a different version of black. They all looked the same. But we decided in 2000 that we were going to paint them all white. And we did that for a couple different reasons. One is there was an innovation behind it, which was you could see the face of the golf club better when the crown of the golf club is white. And the other was we had more drivers on tour than anyone else in the world, but when you watched golf, they all looked the same. So we wanted the world to know when guys were taking off a head cover that actually said Callaway or Ping or Mizuno, and they were secretly playing our golf club, that the world would know that. And so it was kind of fun because guys like Davis Love and Fred Couples Luke Donald, some of those guys back then, they were kind of getting away with not playing what they were contracted to play, and no one would ever catch them on TV because it's just like a black golf club. We painted the world white, and everybody had to kind of true that up. But yes.
So with the players on tour, are they specifically contracted with companies to be TaylorMade athletes that have to play those clubs, or is it just their choice to pick what clubs they think will perform best for them? How does that work?
At the end of the day, they get to pick. They get to make that decision. They could play whatever they wanted for free. They could play whatever they wanted for a contract. Some switch for dollars. Some switch for performance. Most of our contracts are based off of we pay you to play our equipment, but we just want you to play whatever equipment is best for you. So we believe in our core that we make the best equipment and we'll pay you to play it. And ultimately, that's kind of how the contracts are. Our contracts, like our big four guys, they all have 13 club deals. Tour players or golfers carry 14 clubs in their bag. We allow kind of one flex club just in case. But then kind of on down, the way our company is structured, we have some guys that are just driver contracts, like a guy like Davis Love, who's the Ryder Cup captain this year. He plays our driver. He plays our driver because he likes it, and he has a nice contract, but nothing bank-breaking for him to play it. Some guys switch for money, but most of the guys, I think at the root of it, where I'll give you an interesting kind of thing to consider is, we've spent a lot of money on tour to make sure that we have guys and gals on all the different tours. This year, we've shifted a lot of our dollars from some of the other tours, from the LPGA and from the Champions Tour. We've moved those dollars into other tours. So there's not as much money for the woman player or for the senior tour player. But what's happened is our driver count on those tours has gone up. So without paying them, they've just migrated to the better performing product. At least that's the story I will tell you. But it was the notion was built by the guy who ran sports marketing for us years ago. He said, hey, if you could ever create a world where you didn't play athletes, our company should foundationally be built on the premise that they would play our products because they're better than anybody else's. And so that's how we're wired. Does that answer it for you? Okay. So we decided to paint the world white, and it crazy took the world by storm. This is in 2011, 2012 is when we went on this crazy growth curve. We were growing at kind of low double-digit, top line growth for quite some time. This one went through the moon, and we were gaining hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And at this point here, our profit as a golf company was kind of in the 10, 11% zone. So we were contributing back to the parent company $100 million, $150 million, kind of $200 million in profit, right? So at this point, we launched another product right on the heels of this, another white metal wood that was called Rocket Balls. And really what that was is it had a slot in the bottom, which had been kind of messed with before, but we made it a little more interesting, and the tour switched like mad, and so the industry chased it. And what got scary about it is in 2011, we set a record for size and profitability. And then in 2012, we blew the roof off of that number. So then we set another record for growth or for revenue and profitability in 2012. So here's where the danger comes, right? And I said there were a couple things that I think are really foundational to the success of a company. This journey all the way from 1979 all the way to here was, can we do things that help the golfer perform better? Even when we painted them white, right? There was an innovation performance reason for that, or when we put a slot in the bottom of it and called it Rocket Balls. It was because it was a better golf club, right? So we went on this climb here. Then all of a sudden you realize, like, okay, we actually are owned by a parent, right? This German company, this $20 billion beast. We've now become nearly $2 billion, right? So we're almost 10% of their income, and we're writing big checks at the end of the year that are covering some of the mishaps of some of the other business units. So they like that. So then they said, well, you guys were on this crazy growth here, and then you did that, and then you did it again. Just keep doing that. And so this is where the people part of it kind of comes in, right? Is they said, rather than us being able to recognize on our own that this might have been an anomaly and that we should have kind of called a timeout and said, hey, we need to kind of average this curve, and that's not what the normal spike's going to look like. We weren't able to convince the parent that that was an anomaly. And so in 2013, they said, go do it again. And as a group of leaders in the company, we said it was impossible. And they said, yeah, we hear you, but you're going to do it. And so we tried to do it. And then things changed, right? We were no longer following that mission, right? That kind of noble core purpose of just making products to help golfers play better golf. What we were trying to do was make more money. And that's when things changed for us as a company. And so then in 2013, we launched a metalwood. And it didn't do what happened in 2011 or 2012. It didn't have, we were still number one. We were still selling 2 times more than anybody else, but it wasn't blowing a new ceiling off. And so, oh my God, we're not going to make our year. Let's launch another metalwood. So 4 months later, we launched another metalwood. And oh my God, that one didn't work. So what should we do? Let's launch another metalwood. And so in that year, 2013, we launched 3 metalwoods. The following year, we launched 3 more. And we just kept trying to launch our way out of it. And the challenge was we were chasing something that wasn't possible anymore. And we had lost sight of our dream. And that's when this drift happened, right? So that's when the fall over the cliff occurred. And we found ourselves trying to be a company built on making more money and selling more stuff. And I go back to kind of one of those core tenets for me, which is if you do the right things, the money's going to find you. It always does. And we struggled here. We struggled as people that make up a brand to convince a parent that that just wasn't possible. And so we tried. And we tried by just putting more stuff in the market. And the market just revolted on us. The retailer said, enough, I can't. Your inventory levels are too high. I haven't got rid of the last thing you sent me. I can't bring in more of what you're saying here. I mean, I'll take some of it, but I can't absorb what you're doing. And the golfer revolted on us too and said, enough of you guys. That golf club that you just launched can't be that much better than the one you just launched 4 months ago. I'm not going to buy that one. And so same thing 4 months later. And that's where the challenge really happened, right, is that we tried to do something that we thought we could do by just because, you know, there were, and I would say some of the things that set in were the people dynamics. We had an executive team that had been used to being on a curve like this, and now there was crazy things that were happening. And so there was this emotional stir that happened, right, of like, whose fault was it? Was it the product group's fault? Was it the marketing group's fault? Was it sales group's fault? And so there was this blame game, and I talk about it as like it was this toxicity phase. And at the end of the day, you know, this place I work, it's just made up of people, and you better hope you guys can figure it out together, or else, you know, there's going to be tension. And tension's fine, but this one turned a bit ugly, and it was because we were used. Well, part of it was because we were used to winning so easily. And then it got into this phase, and we started to look for folks to blame. When I look at, it became, you know, kind of so bad. And then there was a personnel change that happened at the company too. And I share that with you from the standpoint of our CEO at the time said, okay, we have these 4 brands. Ultimately, I want to appoint a president of these 4 brands in the company. And so it's going to be down to one of you 3 guys. And I was one of those guys. So it was going to be me, this guy, David Abeleys, and this other gentleman. And at the time, he said, I'm going to make my decision in the fall, which was fine by me. I mean, I enjoy being a marketing guy more than anything. So I said, hey, pick one of them. I don't want that job. And I went home and I told my wife that, and she was like, maybe that's the wrong answer. And so I went back and said, no, if I was wrong, actually, you can pick me if you want. I do want to be the president of the company, so I want to erase what we said yesterday. Anyway, in the fall, he picked one of the other guys. And the 3rd guy said, hey, I'm out. So I'm leaving. I don't like being a part of this. The whole thing was folks weren't getting along with each other. Anyway, I said I'd stick around for a while. Ultimately, I left 4 months later during kind of this window right here. So I was gone for 2014, which was cool for me for a couple of reasons. One was I got to go open my eyes up and go see other things instead of just being in the golf, you know, weeds for every single day. And so I left. But what I realized at the time was I missed it. And I missed being a part of something that I loved. And I've been lucky in that I got out of college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I stumbled into the golf industry, which I grew up playing golf. So I loved it. And I didn't really appreciate how much I loved getting to do something I loved until it was gone. So I wanted to get my way back into it. And I kind of fuzzled around with some efforts to get back into the industry. And then in 2015, a new CEO had already been had come in since the one president had been named. And then I was trying to buy Ashworth away from him because I figured I could take that brand back and we could turn it into something cool again. And he said, hey, instead of that, why don't you think about coming back again? And I said, well, I'm not coming back unless some of the other people dynamics change. And so some of the other people dynamics changed. I came back. And that other guy who left as well, he came back. So he came back, I came back, and the new CEO got kicked out 3 months later. And the other guy came back, he got made CEO about a year ago, of which I will say this. Remember in 2000 I said there was this crazy meeting that happened and there was a small group of individuals that said, we got to go do something really, really cool. Well, something really similar happened last spring as well, where we were going to die. This company was going to die. Die to the level of fall off the face of the earth, never to be heard of again, maybe. But we needed something special to happen, and we were in that free fall mode. And so we anchored ourselves to some of the things that were critical to us. We said enough's enough. We're going to hang on to our product life cycles a lot longer than we ever have because we make the best products in the marketplace. So we're going to let the consumers enjoy those at a more normal rate, and we're committed to that. We won't bring a product to market unless it's better, measurably better than the last one on that. We will recommit to dominating the pyramid and tour. And we will tell a better story. We had lost our way, and lost our way in storytelling, I mean in the way the products looked and the way we told our stories. Our marketing had fallen off the map. And it was as a result of a lot of different things. We had changed the dream. We were no longer going to be the best product company in the world. We were going to be the most profitable golf company in the world. And it's hard to look at the world of golfers and say, hey, you like playing golf? Yeah. Well, let me tell you about my metalwood. And if you buy it, I make more money. But it's a lot more fun to walk up to you and say, hey, you're a golfer? You are, huh? Let me tell you about these adjustable weights on the bottom and what this is going to do for you. I'd buy that. And so right now we find ourselves in this crazy turnaround. I said we were in the zone of largest, most profitable, and we were in this space. And then here, we were now shrinking at an alarming rate. We're now kind of level set. We're about $1 billion in size. And last year we lost over $100 million after losing $100 million the year before. So all the money we made, we kind of subsequently lost. And part of the problem there was we didn't control the growth. We didn't control the way we were spending as a company. So last year, we also had to go on this crazy turnaround program. We hired a consulting group to come in, and we got after it. And within a year's time, we've been able to cut close to $150 million of expense out of the company, and it hasn't been without heartache. And by the end of next year, we will have cut $200 million out of the company. And this year, we're going to turn from losing $110 million into a profitable company again. So in 1 year's time, this small group of committed individuals decided they were going to do something remarkable right about here. And I think the growth of the company is now back on a different curve. Yes, sir.
Two quick things. One, 2012, whenever you guys put those 3 items out in 1 year, that was really confusing. I mean, we would go to the store and look and say, gee, but isn't that different from the thing that came out 3 months ago? My question is, maybe you've already mentioned up here, is other than the pros, who are your next best customers? I mean, we've got the old guys like me, you've got the young guys that are in college and high school. I didn't see that.
Yeah, I didn't do a demographic slide. I apologize for that, but it's a killer demographic for us that we chase after. The core of it, the lion's share of it is male dominant. It is men 35 to 50, highly educated, highly affluent today. And then the layer below that is the next generation, more still male dominated, but it's the 25 to 35-year-old man. The market side, the women's market itself is only about 10% of the total pie, and it is extremely segmented. There's nothing lion's share like that that really matters in that space. But so that's what we get after. Why I think there's interesting space on the horizon for golfers. So it's that's who we go after as far as a purchase behavior. Where I think it's interesting is we're slipping a little bit. If you looked at kind of a 10-year snapshot in time over years, there's always been whatever that generation has, whether it be Gen X, Gen Y, Millennial, on through. We've always had a certain percentage of that playing golf. And that number today is lower than it has been historically. And so as an industry, we're trying to figure out why and what we can do around, about that. Some say it's time, some say it's cost of the entry into the sport. And you can fall victim to those conversations that it's really expensive and it takes too much time and it's hard to play. And those are some of them. But there are counterpoints in there. But where I think it's interesting is for the first time ever, and the lenses that I look at are, one as an industry executive, but two as a dad. I have 3 little kids, and I have the opportunity to look through the lens as a parent as well. And I can get my kids into basketball, baseball, soccer, football, flag football, lacrosse, swimming, like that. I mean, like that. I can get my kid into a beginner lacrosse set so easy. Do any of you have any idea how to get your kids into golf, right? Oh my God, where do I get golf clubs that fit somebody this big? And then how expensive is it? And who's going to teach them? I don't know how to play golf, and so it's interesting. But what I do think is interesting is there's a couple different initiatives that have just happened. And I think it's just long lens stuff for us as an industry. And one of them is PGA Junior League. And the PGA of America is an interesting entity. Is in that it's a union, but they're all independent, and so they kind of work together, but they don't do a really good job. But every club pro in America is a part of the same group, PGA of America. They've just launched this PGA Junior League, which is team golf for kids. They get a golf shirt, it's got a number on the back. They play in a scramble, which a scramble means everybody hits a shot, and then you pick the best shot and everybody hits from there. So if you hit a tragically bad shot, your shoulders aren't going to slump and you don't have to be the kid that ruined the match, you can play on. And so they've just introduced this, we're 2 years into it, and they had close to 100,000 kids participate in it last year. Now that isn't going to help us with millennials or that world. And the other one that I think is interesting is this drive, chip, and putt thing that Augusta and USGA and the kind of the governing bodies have kind of lined up behind, where they play it's kind of the golf version of punt, pass, and kick, and they play the finals at Augusta the Sunday before the Masters, which is a pretty cool deal. So I think there's an interesting, how are we going to get youth into this? And then if you look at metaphors in other sports, right? There was the Michael Jordan era in basketball, and he followed Magic, and oh my God, what's going to happen to the NBA when Michael goes away? And then oh my goodness, LeBron happens, and now Steph Curry's happening, and so it always kind of follows. So what's going to happen? Is anyone going to ever replace Tiger? I don't know. Hopefully, but in today's world, there's an interesting band of 4 guys that are pretty cool and are all millennials by age. So it's an interesting time for us for sure as golfers.
What about women?
Yeah, so it's an interesting challenge. There are a bunch of initiatives to get women into the game, and the LPGA has done a remarkable job at promoting the sport itself. The challenge has been for TaylorMade, as an equipment company, is that women haven't bought a lot of equipment. They bought more on the soft goods side of things. So from a business prioritization perspective, we've struggled to say, to make a club for specifically for a female golfer requires the same R&D, same timeline, same cost structure. And then when the market is only this big, it's a real struggle for us to say, let's spend as much time on that. But I will say that we've dedicated resources. We introduced a women-specific line of clubs for a beginner woman. For women, it's an athletic endeavor. We view it the same. It's a performance sport. The equipment we make is geared towards golfers regardless of gender. But it's been a challenge historically.
If you're going to get kids involved, there's a connection between moms and kids involved that seems interesting to pursue.
It is for sure.
So my question is more around the innovation and the relevance, staying relevant, and then just the market shift. So as it relates to innovation, a lot of industries, as they innovate, they need to stay within certain regulatory guidelines. Are there such monsters in the golf world where innovation is limited? Besides a stick that can hit a ball, are you limited in any way in a regulatory fashion? And then, as far as relevancy, I think that maybe it already exists, but if you had something that speaks in the language of either millennials or that, for women even, an app or a mobile device where there's golf and a monster would probably go a long way, actually. But I leave that just as a thought. The innovation part, I'd really like to hear a little bit about how you innovate and if you have those constraints.
There's crazy constraints. There's two groups that constrain technology in this sport, which is, it's interesting, like if you compare it to snow skiing, there's regulations for Olympic skiers, but as a recreational skier or snowboarder, you can ski or snowboard on pretty much whatever you want. So it's an interesting sport for them in that they can make things that just help kind of the average skier have more fun on the mountain. For us, there's this weird tension that's created in golf. And yeah, there are rules around how big they are, how fast they can be, how much spin a golf ball can have. And so we have to play within those boundaries. I will say, though, that those rules have been tweaked ever so slightly over the last 50 years, but only ever so slightly. And so kind of all along this path, this innovation path, has always been well, there's rules. I don't know how you're going to figure that out, right? And that's how you kind of go from something that looks like this thing to this. And what makes it fun to be at a company that will continue to push and push and push. There for sure are those challenges. Now, what's interesting about our company is we come in every day trying to make this thing, make something better than this thing, right? Can we make this one just a little bit more obsolete than something else? And I will tell you the other things that are coming to this sport is the world of connected devices. And you see that in everything you do, right? In fitness, in all of your daily lives. And so we'd be silly to tell you that the day isn't coming where this thing's going to talk to the phone in your pocket and we're going to be able to help you play better golf, because I now know not only that you bought it, but I know what you're doing with it. And I know where you've put the weights, and I can also breadcrumb you around your entire golfing life if you are so inclined. And I can see that even though you think you hit it 280 right down the middle, you actually only hit it 195, and you kind of hit a poof fade every single time off the tee. So let's get you engaged in something else in golf, which is let's first start moving the weights, or let's get you signed up with one of these club pros, or just watch this tutorial and let's see if I can help you play a little bit better.
You have the data to contact me and tell me.
For sure. If you want to get into our world, that day is coming, and it's going to be very, very exciting. You know, so yeah, innovation exists from the size and scope and things of here. Sorry, the last thing is, we could create an illegal golf club that didn't conform to the rules, but there's a weird tension that's created in our sport of what is interesting is I can play the exact same thing that Jason Day plays when I step out on a tee, and I don't really want to be branded like the guy that's playing the illegal thing, because then I can't post my scores and I'm kind of lesser a dude if that's your way about it. It's just been a part of the cloud of the sport is you play conforming equipment, and that day may change too someday. Yes.
I had a question about, you talked a lot about the mentality that the leadership team or the executive team had throughout the years of the company, but how has that trickled into their employees and the rest of the team for creating that innovation?
So during the upcycle, it was like living in a fairyland, and innovation happened, and ideas seemed to come from everywhere. The interesting story about how we painted the driver white was a gentleman by the name of Bill Price. He worked in the putter group, and he came out and he said, "Hey, I want to paint the putters white." And we were like, "You can't paint the putters white. Nobody." And so he decided to paint the putters white, and the putters sold like crazy. And because you could see him on tour, and people were like, "I want," so they went crazy. So he decided to paint them white, and then he said, "Hey, what if we painted the drivers white?" Of which then, and I remember this vividly, the current CEO at the time said to him, and I quote, "Shame on you, Bill Price, shame on you for even thinking that will work." And we were like, oh my God. But we decided to paint them white anyway. But my point on that was innovation could come from anyone at the time. During the drift part, it was a dire company. The culture of the company sucked. People didn't want to be there. The attrition rate of employees was sickening. You couldn't have an idea because it wasn't going to work. And just in the last year, the uptick in the emotion and the bounce in the step. And I'm lucky because I was there. I was there for a little bit of the dip. I got to leave. I got to come back in. And when I came back in, it was just a company of navel gazers, in that everybody had this kind of woe is me thing. But when we had that kind of second small meeting and then said, you know what? And one of the questions was, should we change our mission statement? And so the mission statement was to be the best performance golf brand in the world. And we debated it, right? Like, should we change our mission statement? And then we just said, how could the mission statement, the best performance golf brand in the world, actually have an expiration date? And what had happened was we just kind of lost sight of it. But if we can just recommit to that, and then some of the core tenets of creativity can come from anywhere, making better product, dominating the tour, it's amazing to see the way a company would respond. And to kind of one of the other points, right? That building up in Carlsbad is just a building full of people, right? And if they're not excited to come in there every day, that curve was going to keep sliding and sliding and sliding. And so it absolutely permeated the company during the early years, and it was lost over that kind of dark period. And I would say just over this last year, there's a bounce in our step, and there's a sense of we want, kind of this winner's mentality thing, which just that for me, that's the evidence of creativity and a culture taking shape. Yeah. Yes?
I'm curious if you could tell us what sort of the broader investor appetite, obviously being a unit, a $1 billion unit of a much larger parent, say 5% of the parent, more than a rounding error, let's say, yeah. But still rather small. If other players in the industry have kind of conceded that it's in this secular decline, how has Adidas and shareholders and the competition kind of viewed?
How has Adidas viewed us?
Investment attractiveness.
Specific to our business unit?
Yeah.
Are you talking specifically to the potential
As much as you can disclose.
Sale of our company? Yeah, so we are owned by Adidas Group, right? They watched us go on this crazy climb. We were writing big, healthy checks every year, and then we stopped. And so rightfully so, they decided they wanted to see if we were worth anything on the open market. And we're in the middle of the evaluation process right now. And I can tell you that there have been a healthy number of folks that have come in and wanted to open up the hood and see for varying degrees. Can I help with the turnaround? Can I make some money off of it? Or do I want to own a passion brand and a passion sport because it's nice to have as a part of our portfolio? If the company decides they want to sell us, there's a line of people that want to buy us. I guess would be the best way I would say that. But as far as like the valuation part, we're still right in the middle of that. So, to the level I can answer that question, I do my best. Yes.
In working out a global branding strategy, how much do you customize and tailor your products in different markets around the world, or create more of a central brand image?
It's mostly centralized. Most of the products are created here. Well, on TaylorMade specific, all the products are created here. The Asia Pacific region has a specific subset called Glory, Gloire, that is a ultra premium line from TaylorMade that we launched in Japan, I think 5 years ago. So Japan, Korea, China all carry that range as a major part of theirs. So they have a duality approach in the marketplace over there. But by and large, this is the majority of what we make and sell is kind of a global range. It's very different on the apparel and footwear side than it is on the hard goods side. Yes?
Does TaylorMade actually employ physicists and engineers directly through innovation and development of these new products to measure the spin of the ball and measure of the new little nuances that affect the metal wood, or do they work with an entity that measures it and you guys work together as an association with that?
We do it internally. We literally have a team of rocket scientists downstairs, and they're a blast to be around because they're wired so differently than me as a storyteller. But they are some of the gentlemen, and so there's material scientists, there's inertia scientists. We have some folks that literally used to build missiles and rockets, and it's fun to listen to them tell stories of their prior life and this life. I think a missile is in the world of, it cracks like 7-8 Gs. A golf club at impact is over 20,000 Gs, or 6,000 Gs, sorry. But a golf club is 20,000 Gs. So it's an interesting world, but we have an army of rocket scientists. They sit in a dark area of the building with their heads down, but that's what makes them happy, so for sure. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was thinking about the structure, and I was thinking about the fact that you had the kind of autonomy to take the risks, and then once the parent kind of put some goals on you that diminish the risk and the innovation. And I was wondering if that would have been different if you had been an independent, publicly traded company, if the market maybe had put that type of risk on you, if it would have. So if you could comment on that, and then also, so that got me thinking about whether or not as an entity, if you have an independent board advising the executive team, and if so, how does that work with the parent?
So I'll go backwards. We don't have an independent board. The parent obviously has their own board. Our interaction is mostly with the company's chairman, Herbert Heiner. And so we meet with him 4 or 5 times a year, of which we do executive level, kind of long lens presentations and short-term conversations. He's a lot more involved today than he was during the big check era. So our guidance is our executive team today. And then I think you're serving a different but also a financial master if you're a publicly traded golf company. It's one of the struggles, having never worked at Callaway, but it's definitely one of the struggles that they go through as the publicly traded golf company. Ping's interesting because they're a privately owned, family-owned business. So if they have years where they don't make a lot of money, that's fine with their family. Callaway has to deal with what the street thinks they're going to do and whether or not they did it. And I think those are probably similar tensions for us as a part of Adidas, and also would be if somebody else owned us.
Maybe we could take one more question, and then Bob, if you have maybe 5 minutes after, if they want to come up and ask you.
Yeah, for sure, I'm happy to hang. Yes.
So you mentioned how targeting millennials is becoming more and more of a focus. I remember playing junior golf, and a lot of my high school buddies getting sponsored by like Titleist and Nike. Do you guys do that at all, or do you guys stick to mainly targeting them through the drag chip and putt, through the junior golf scramble?
No, so we interestingly enough, since you were a junior golfer, you know of AJGA? Yes. Okay, so AJGA, since its inception, has had one title sponsor in the form of Titleist and FootJoy. And Titleist has been a dominant junior golf company. We became the title sponsor for AJGA this year, which is a crazy shift in their workings and in Titleist's workings for sure. And so the pyramid in this sport works in a magical way, and there are pyramids at every level as well, right? Even up on tour, as soon as one of the best players in the world plays a white metalwood, they all want to play a white metalwood, and on and on and on and on. And so we know that right below the tour is kind of that local hero guy, club pro level guy, and then right below that is the better playing junior. And having relationships with all of them is critical. We have college programs, which is, we have unique relationships because of all the Adidas schools in America, and we have federations that we partner around the world with in the UK and France and China. So we invest pretty heavily in that junior golf world because it's a critical level in the influence. And if you think about like a better playing junior player, these 12-year-olds that are +4 handicaps, that can break par. These kids, when they come home and they play an M1 metalwood, are just as influential as the local club champ at the course, and who's a 45-year-old. And so yeah, it is definitely a part of that influence pyramid for us. I say dominate the tour. When I say that, that means dominate the pyramid for us, for sure. Yeah, by all means. Man, I hope that was helpful. Does anybody, do you want one more? Or?
Why don't we leave a few minutes and people can come up and
Okay. I hope that was interesting. I appreciate the opportunity to tell our story. Thanks.